Uh, my name is Shiva. I work for the product management team at HYCU. Been with the company for almost 6.5 years now, but my passion in my career is basically based on data protection. I started my data protection days back in ArcServe. I don't know if you remember that. It's been almost 20 years now. So yeah, I feel old. But started my, as a support engineer. Here I am working for the next gen data protection company, as everybody pointed out. Now, today I'm focused towards highlighting how Haiku can basically help with cloud mobility, so to speak of. And when I speak of cloud mobility, the one thing that I want to get very clear about are the set of use cases. In this specific case, I'm focused on application-based workloads hosted on VMs, right? Could be on any hypervisor or hyperscaler. How our customers can basically achieve workload mobility across on-prem, across platform, and across public cloud infrastructures. Now, before I get into all those aspects, I just wanted to talk about the real challenges that are involved, especially when it comes to moving your workloads from one platform to another hyperscaler. And frankly, there are a lot of challenges, and I've done my best to abstract them as much as I can. But the first part that we noticed amongst our customers is when you have different cloud vendors, you basically have different set of rules and requirements, right? You have a different set of API calls and CLIs to ensure how you go about converting your vDisks, how do you go about converting your VM types, how do you go about specifying the network settings, how do you go about specifying the driver injection at the source or at the destination, how do you go about specifying the location, how do you go about specifying permissions. The list keeps going on and on. I know this because I've been dealing with customers day in and day out, but you cannot expect an IT ops or a cloud ops guy to remember all of these steps, right? So that's the first challenge ever. And furthermore, to exacerbate this problem, you basically have vendors like cloud vendors literally changing their API calls. Some of them are announced and some of them literally happen at the back end. Nobody knows, and we literally have to discover them by ourselves, right? So that's the first one, literally moving goalposts. The second part is rising cloud costs. Now, let's not fool ourselves, guys. I mean, cloud is probably the most optimal solution out there, but they're not cheap, so to speak of. And when you take any business, I mean, the cloud consumption or the rate of cloud consumption is always going to go up. Why is that? Because their business demands them to do so, right? Fair enough. You can optimize it, you can do whatever you want, but the cloud consumption is definitely going to go up. And when you try to back them up with no optimization in place, your costs are going to go double, triple, or even quadruple. And I've seen this personally amongst our customers because we thought object storage was the cheapest. Think again, it's not, right? And last but not the least, cloud in itself is not immune to inflation, pun intended, of course, right? Because I don't know how many of you remember Google Cloud announcing that they were going to increase the price of snapshots. They were not kidding, guys. They were true about it. And that's when Google Cloud really started to look at solutions like Haiku very seriously, because we are one of the few solutions who support a broad variety of Google Cloud workloads with no snapshot dependency, so to speak of, right? So that's the number two reason, rising cloud costs. Number three is about combating cyber threats. Now, I think this is more of a dead horse that we have beaten over and over again. The bottom line is nobody is immune to this. Nobody is unimportant, right? Everybody is basically vulnerable to cyber threats. And you have several forms of cyber threats. Number one is accidental deletion. Now, this is something that is kind of laughable and nervous at the same time. How many of you remember Google Cloud's incident with UniSuper based out of Australia? So long story, yeah, okay, I see some nodding heads, right?
We got a native here.
Yeah, you know what just happened, right? Someone accidentally deletes a subscription, and what happens? Pretty much the entirety of the infrastructure gets blown away, including their backups. Why? Because the backups are within that subscription itself. So it's accidental, but the damage is still the same. Number two is insider attacks. We've heard several cases of disgruntled employees going rogue, deleting mailboxes, deleting data just to prove their point. So this is something that is unavoidable at the end of the day. And last but not the least, my favorite, malware and ransomware attacks. Of course, right? So this is the third aspect, especially when people talk about moving their resources across public cloud because they want to maintain that security, right? So with that being said, how does Haiku and Dell together can help you out? And again, I've tried to do my best in simplifying the story. First part is about innovation, right? HYCU has, as David pointed out, has really good innovation when it comes to discovering multiple data sources at an extremely short turnaround time. Let me just get into the details of what that means. What I mean by that is, I'm sorry, the clicker is kind of weird. I should have known this better, but anyways. All right. So what I mean by constant innovation is HYCU does have the ability to integrate with multiple data sources with high-end API level integration. What this means is we are enforcing all of the best practices. We are ensuring that there are no performance degradation, so to speak of, and the connection in itself is always secure. That's number one. Number two is we have the ability to streamline all of those manual steps that I just talked about when it came to cloud migration, cross-cloud or cross-hypervisor migration. So you as an end user don't have to worry about keeping of those steps like manually. Number three is also keeping a constant tab of what changes are being made. This is by default the most difficult thing to do, because keeping track of changing CLIs and changing APIs when they're not announced is the most frustrating part. And we do that real hard work. And last but not the least, our solution is extremely simple and easy to deploy. You don't need any plugins, you don't need any agents. Deployed instantaneously, requires minimal maintenance, and absolutely requires no training, so to speak of, right? So that is how we basically solve the problem of ensuring that we don't have any issues in integrating with multiple hyperscalers and hypervisors, right? The second part is DDV's proven optimization. Now, again, as David Noy pointed out, data domain has been in the field for a while. I know this personally. I'm an ex-NetApper myself. So data domain is very close to my heart too, because data domain is the king of deduplication. And there's no other vendor in the market, in the world today, who has the ability to beat that number, right? Point blank. But my favorite aspect about data domain is DDVE. That is the real crown jewel, people, because DDVE is basically the virtualized version of your physical data domain. And virtualizing a physical appliance is no easy task, right? Rubrik has tried to do this. Cohesity has tried to do this. Even NetApp has tried to do this. And the rate of success is not even remotely close to what data domain has done in the market today. DDVE has been in the market for more than 14 years. This is other than just the stats what David Noy showed about with regards to the amount of capacity or the number of customers. It's about how long have you been in the market, and DDVE has come a long way, which is why it's one of my favorites, especially when it comes to optimization efficiency technology, because with DDVE, I now have the ability to dedupe the data on the cloud and also have the ability to transfer a minimal amount of data for ingress and egress, right? And last but not the least, one of the best parts about DDVE is it could be easily deployed on any of your hyperscalers or hypervisors, right? I basically did one of that yesterday on Google Cloud myself, and it's not that hard at all. It's readily available on Google or any of your hyperscalers marketplace, and the deployment is pretty simple and straightforward. So with that being said, I know I've been talking a lot. Any questions? All right. So that's the second part with regards to optimization. Now, the third part is with regards to the whole aspect of how HYCU and DDVE can come together in terms of data security to combat cyber threats, right? Now, HYCU is well known to provide air-gapped backup security. I mean, other vendors call it as zero trust architecture. And this is something that's standard across all of the backup vendors. Multi-factor authentication, network segmentation, multi-tenancy with role-based access control, treating the solution as a black box, and the list keeps going on and on. We're all there. I'm not going to basically say that we're unique in this. Pretty much every vendor does this. But what is really unique is with regards to HYCU and DDVE making use of the DD Boost protocol along with the inbuilt worm functionality that basically caters to compliance and governance modes. So what this means is when you have DDV deployed on cloud, the entire traffic is proprietary. You're not moving the data using NFS or CIFS. You're moving the data using DD Boost. While the technology in itself is inherently efficient, it also caters to being highly security conscious, because there's no one on earth who can breach that traffic, because it's totally alien to the rest of the world, right? And in addition to that, you also have worm capabilities. So even if someone basically manages to reach that backup, they won't be able to delete it at the end of the day, right? That's number two. Number three, our solution does have inbuilt anomaly detection capabilities, which basically help you to validate your backups, and we can also help you to prevent from good backups from being expired by policy definitions. And last but not the least, HYCU and DDV can also provide you with plethora of recovery options. They could be granular, they could be full, or there could be a combination of both, and you can restore it wherever you want. All right? So what am I really trying to say with all these things? We not only help you to protect the data regardless of where it resides, HYCU and DDV can ensure that your data is truly versatile, and this can basically help you to prevent cloud vendor lock-in. How? Two simple reasons. We're truly hypervisor and cloud agnostic, meaning that you have the ability to back up and recover anywhere. But in addition to that, DDV helps us to achieve that level of cloud efficiency with regard to storage and egress costs. So you get to swallow that poison pill, but it's taken in a very gradual way that's not going to kill your wallet, right? And that is how we basically cater to the cloud mobility story. Any questions?
Just one,
Sure.
I'll say a note that I know this is still a very real thing, but it's becoming less of a thing because we've latched onto the cost of egress fees. Two of the top four have eliminated egress fees. So it becomes a bit of a fuzzier message as we go forward. I know there's more to it than that, but I worry sometimes we still get stuck on that thing, and then a cloud admin goes, no, there are no egress fees anymore, right? So there are hidden behind it. It's just one thing to note that message is.
Egress is just one part. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Egress is just one part of the puzzle. Storage costs is basically the big problem out there, especially when people say object storage is cheap. No, it isn't. Even like if you go to the lowest tier, no, it isn't. We've burnt our fingers with that, and which is exactly why we're partnered with a solution like DDV. But yes, I totally agree with your point there. In addition to egress charges, yes, there are a lot of hidden costs as well. And by making use of efficient data transfer, you also have the flexibility of reducing your expectations on SLAs. Your RPOs and your RTOs are going to be way more quicker. So there are more advantages to that as well. But yes, totally understandable. All right.
So I'm just trying to figure out what Dell and HYCU have been partners for a while. Was this one of the announcements? Have you taken it up a notch just recently, or is this something that's been in place at the current level for a while?
David.
I'll answer this. So HYCU became a Boost ecosystem partner last year. So basically we're able to take the Boost API and be able to use it directly for the communication that Shiva was talking about. We've been working with HYCU as well as a number of other backup vendors over the course of the years. As I said, our priority number one is to grow the data domain footprint. But what took it up a notch is that, we recently announced that we are going to add HYCU to the price list in the ETC program, which basically allows our sellers to go and say, hey, we're never going to lose a DD opportunity for lack of workload support. If we walk into a customer and they say, I need to back up Atlassian, we're going to say, hey, guess what? We got it. So we've always got support for every workload.
And how long ago was that?
This was just the beginning of this year.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, David. All right. Actually, it's a perfect segue.
All right.
Because
Here we go.
so we basically have one of the customer use cases, and I wanted David to basically talk about this. Thank you.
We just build it out all the way.
Oh, sure.
There we go.
Thank you.
So, you talked about egress and the importance of keeping that. Does it matter so much about keeping that line of communication between the application and the storage minimal? In this particular example, this is a federal customer. I'm not going to go into who they are for obvious reasons, but this is a agency or a group that have things like disconnected sites, forward locations, where you don't always have full connectivity back into a home base to basically go and replicate. So the more that you can minimize how much is going across the wire, the better, especially for these kind of locations that don't have giant pipes connecting them back to home. Now, as I said, this particular customer was in the process of migrating from VMware to alternative hypervisors. And what HYCU was able to help them do, I said, we're going to provide the industry's most resilient and cost-effective storage for your backup software, for your backup data. But we are going to partner with software vendors to make sure that customers can adopt any workload. If that means that they're moving from one workload to another, and in this particular case, HYCU could help them migrate from VMware to the alternative, which in this case is an Azure-based solution, a Microsoft-based solution, then that simplifies their life. It helps them do the migration. There's a huge transformation going on inside of this particular agency. And what's more is that when we look at the security posture, this is a very security conscious customer. So they care about things like, do you have your federal certifications? Are you encrypting everything? Basically how buttoned down is it? And so the combination of HYCU's federal security posture as well as the security posture of the data domain product itself, which is APL certified, is what makes this a super interesting solution. And at the end of the day, this is a customer who has a lot of data. So having uniformity across forward locations, central locations, and cloud-based locations, the kind of security that we just talked about, ease of migration, ability to onboard new application workloads really quickly, it just made a lot of sense. And of course, driving down costs. So, one thing that Shiva mentioned is cyber, and well, it isn't listed here, and we don't talk about it as much, but look, one of the nice things about the data domain product is a storage product. Typically, when you any storage product, you have your primary, you have a disaster recovery copy, and then now there's a need for a third copy. What's the third copy all about? What Shiva just mentioned. If you lose your account, if your account gets compromised, the third copy, and what we can do with data domain, and it works with HYCU too, is have a cyber recovery vault, where that cyber recovery vault is partitioning another account with a different set of admin privileges, so that the administrators of the primary and DR account cannot get into it, and then a third copy can be used for recovery in the case that you were compromised in your first and second recovery. So this is all critical stuff, but I thought this would be a great example of sort of the importance of having this kind of a joint solution.
All right. Thank you, Dave.
Just on,
Sure.
where do you see as far as like the percentage of people that are HYCU is a great add-on to data domain more than data domain is a great add-on to a HYCU client? Like, I would see that HYCU is a different opportunity to be sort of like mid-market, move down market, whereas data domain clearly a fantastic enterprise play. So do you see bi-directional opportunities for Dell moving stuff into a HYCU customer environment?
Look, I first of all, let me challenge the notion that it's only a high-end enterprise. 25,000 customers, the majority of that number is actually not in the large enterprise because there just aren't that many large enterprise customers. What DDVE allows us to do is to go down into very small deployments.
Right.
Now, we sell a ton of data domain. It used to be 3300 model. We now have a 6410 model coming out that starts at 12 terabytes and goes to like, call it 100 to 150, 200 terabytes. A ton of those go out. And you think about regions like in Europe, Asia Pac, you see a lot of those kind of small ones going out, and they're highly channel driven. What the DDVE offer allows you to do is just go take a vanilla bare metal off the COTS commodity off the shelf server, drop DDVE on it. That now becomes a data domain appliance.
Right.
What HYCU does is it basically gives us the workload access, whether it's at that small customer, or actually we're seeing a lot of this in even larger customers, and we'll give you examples of some larger ones later on. But some of the initial opportunities that I'm watching roll through, they're across the spectrum. They're everything from really small to really big.
Yeah.
And when I mean really big, I'm talking like, in the Fortune 500. Yeah.
And of course, in this particular customer case, we mentioned Azure Local. How do you see AWS Outposts appearing much in some of your environments?
I don't see AWS Outposts as much. Azure Stack definitely comes up.
Yeah. And sorry, I don't mean to ask you a generic market question here, but I just saw that and it reminded me that I haven't seen too
If
many
you're asking me
AWS
personally,
Outposts.
I don't see them as much. I don't know if the HYCU team sees them as much.
Yeah.
I mean, this specific story does have a lot of remote offices, so to speak of.
Yeah.
Not exactly AWS Outposts, but yes, we do have a lot of remote office, branch office use cases in our case as well. All right, so back again. So what I wanted to do was not just bore you to death with slides, but also do some live demonstration of what our product is capable of. Now, this is not like a really elaborate demo. It's a very simple architecture that we have. What I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to showcase how our solution basically integrates with data domain on-prem. Could be a physical or could be a virtual, really doesn't matter, but it's on-prem, having the ability to basically do app consistent or crash consistent backups directly onto data domain. And once that is done, how do we basically make use of data domain in HYCU to basically have those backups replicated to cloud and even do restore to cloud? And in this case, I'm basically making use of Google Cloud. So basically trying to showcase the whole cloud mobility aspect with HYCU and data domain put together, right? Okay, so let me just do a quick switch. Let me start with the primary HYCU controller that I have, which is on-prem. So this is basically a HYCU virtual appliance. The entire solution is basically deployed instantaneously because we deliver our solution as a package. It could be a QCOW image if it's a Nutanix. It could be an OVF file if it's a VMware. So on and so forth, depending on the hypervisor. And the entire deployment in itself is so simple and straightforward, where the only manual hard labor that you have to do is basically discover your sources manually. And in this case, it would I'm sorry, I have a lot of interference here. This is not the window I wanted to open. So the thing that I was talking about is the only hard work that you have to do here is basically discover your sources, so to speak of. So in this case, I've basically discovered a Nutanix environment. And in addition to Nutanix, I also have data domain as a backup target, which basically helps me to showcase the fact that we not only have the ability to protect data domain using your traditional NFS or SMB, but my favorite, we have the ability to make use of DD boost protocol for efficient and secure data transfer from source to destination. Right? So this is basically one of those examples. By default, HYCU has a plethora of integration points with DD Boost. For instance, we can make use of DD Boost interface groups for load balancing. We have the ability to make use of encryption. We also have the ability to make use of worm functionality using governance or compliance modes. And there are other features that are on the roadmap that are going to be upcoming very soon. So these are the capabilities. Now, when it comes to performing backups, HYCU is purely a policy-based data protection solution. So what's happening here is we're basically making copies of one of my VMs that I wanted to showcase, which is the VM 004. This VM is basically being replicated or being copied, backed up to your data domain. And again, you have tons of options here. You have the ability to perform granular file level restores under restore file section, or you basically have the ability to restore an entire virtual machine. And this is basically the place where we can showcase the fact that it's not just about restoring VM to its original location, but we also have the ability to clone this VM onto an alternate hypervisor. So basically having the ability to not just clone the VM, but also vDisks onto an alternate hypervisor. But here's where things get even more interesting, because these backups are basically being replicated onto my Google Cloud infrastructure, where we actually have a DDV running natively on Google Cloud, right? Now, I also have a HYCU controller running on Google Cloud, and this is basically the HYCU controller running on Google Cloud as a DR solution. And from here, I can actually showcase the backup of that same virtual machine that has been discovered, located on your DDV running on Google Cloud. And from here, what I can do is I can simply choose that backup and restore it onto your public cloud vendor. And in this case, it's going to be your Google Cloud. As you can see, I also have other plethora of options where I can do restores to AWS or Azure Gov or AWS Gov. But in this specific demo, I'm just focused on Google Cloud. So when you basically do restore to Google Cloud, you can actually see that I can specify all of the details that corresponds to my Google Cloud account. So remember all the checklists that I was talking about, understanding the location, understanding the project. I'm also going to showcase how the VM types and the network configuration basically comes into picture. So I'm basically trying to do a restore to a US central region. So once you do that, this is basically the place where the solution in itself will be talking to the APIs of your Google Cloud that helps you determine what are the available VM types for that specific option, what are the compute and the memory settings that would be translated onto that. For instance, what I'm going to be doing here is I'm just going to specify a simple name. All right. And take a look at this. These are basically the set of options that are natively available on Google Cloud. And this is what I was talking about, the ability to ingest all of the available options on Google Cloud and make them readily available through the API or through the user interface. From here, what happens is we also have discovered automatically the VPC that has been configured on your Google Cloud. And all I would have to do is specify the appropriate operating system and just do a spin up. So now this has literally started the operation of moving an on-prem VM onto your Google Cloud infrastructure. Yes.
So those options, it was just Windows, Linux.
But like, what if I'm running CentOS, Ubuntu, or Windows Server 2022?
It basically comes under
2025?
Linux operating system itself. We basically try to make a broader classification of what kind of operating system do we run on the public cloud vendor. So Linux basically covers all of the flavors, so to speak of.
But it's a backup, right, of a system that already existed?
Yes.
So
It's
what?
basically a parameter that you have to specify when you're launching that VM on the specific hyperscaler, so to speak of. It's more of a representative point at the end of the day. The backup actually does store the appropriate operating system, but it's more of a representative parameter that you have to specify when you're spinning up a VM on.
But why would I need to specify it if you know what it is?
I'm sorry?
Why would I need to specify it if you know what it is? If it's a Windows host, you know you backed up a Windows host, why would I need to select Windows there?
Because it's a parameter that has to be manually specified on the destination, so to speak of, because it's a virtual machine-based backup. So at the end of the day, operating system at that level is a moot point. Subhaya, you wanted to say something, or okay?
I was just going to say, I mean, if you know that it's Windows, why wouldn't you just specify that for me? Rather than me having to
Yeah,
select it.
I was wondering the same
select
thing.
it in the UI. Why wouldn't you just automatically tell the tell the cloud provider that it's Windows?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I think people, we do actually ask for the operating system here is that if customers want specific disk alone, they want to say bring the disk into a Windows machine, you can take a Linux disk and bring it up on a Windows machine, things like that. That's why we give you an option. That's why there are times where you can actually do cross-operating.
There's a weird situation where a customer asked for it.
There are things which you actually bring specific data sets.
On the knowledge of the backed up system question, the drop down of machine sizes, do you recommend or suggest a specific size based on what you know about the backed up VM?
Yes.
So you see, I backed up a 2 CPU, 16 gig.
And we select the appropriate type by default.
Okay.
Right. So the reason why we give you additional options of VM types is you can either under or over provision your VMs on the cloud. But yes, by default, we basically select or provide you a selection of a default VM type based on the amount of compute and memory resources that has been assigned onto that virtual machine.
Okay. How are you handling networking?
So networking, yes, that is one of the biggest items, right? So when it comes to networking, we have the ability to discover all of your VPC settings that have been specified on the cloud. Today, we basically request our end users to have those settings specified on the cloud itself within the given subscription. We have a dedicated team of engineers and professional services engineers who can help customers create these VPCs for people who are brand new to cloud. We have done this on Google, Azure, and AWS. But for now, this has to be created manually on your cloud, and it will be automatically discovered on our HYCU solution.
I was thinking more the networking of the virtual machine itself.
Okay.
So are you able to re-IP that virtual machine as it comes up?
So we do have the ability to do DHCP or even manual IP assignment if required. But yes, we can discover the virtual network interfaces that could be attached to VM, and in addition to that, we can do DHCP or a manual IP assignment if that is what is required.
Okay. Is there an orchestration component here if I wanted to bring up a group of virtual machines
Yes, we
at the same
can.
time
We can.
for like a DR test?
So we basically have, unfortunately, I don't have access to that user interface. It's behind the VPN. But the thing is, we do have the ability to group a multiple set of VMs based on your discretion, right? You can create something called as a DR plan that specifies all of the rules on how the VMs are supposed to be failed over. And this can also include all of your network settings, which would basically be a part of the larger orchestration operation on moving VMs from point A to point B.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you want to say something?
And in terms of, I guess, expanding on that, in terms of the HYCU controller,
Yep.
we've got one in each environment at the moment? Is there a centralized management interface, or are they very sort of separate?
So yes, as far as centralized management interface is concerned, the answer is yes. We do have it for all of our public cloud and for SaaS offerings. From an on-prem standpoint, we are working towards it. We are basically ensuring that we will be having more of a high-level manager of managers view that would basically provide you access to public cloud and also to your on-prem infrastructure. We are in the process of making that as a default option as we move forward, because as much as a single UI sounds really good, it could present a weird set of operational challenges for people who are in a hybrid cloud situation. So we want to be extremely mindful about how we deploy that. But yes, today we do have that option for customers who need that. And we are basically we have made some decisions and we'll be making that as a default option pretty much by the end of this year.
One thing that I'm seeing more and we're hearing more about, especially with VMware making changes that have triggered some different customer behaviors. OpenStack is becoming an attractive landing spot for a lot of enterprises, especially managed OpenStack and some proprietary tools. Do you see that that's a place where you could now, in the same way we're doing to AWS and Azure, is there capabilities or a plan to have a port to OpenStack capability?
Subhaya, can you answer that question for me, please?
Sure, I can add to what she was. Today, if you look at it, we actually have one of the broadest coverage. We actually support from a hypervisor perspective. We support VMware, we support Nutanix AHV, we support Azure Stack HCI, and all three major public clouds we support. OpenStack is one of the things which is definitely get a lot of attention in a lot of customers. When we talk to a lot of people, there are a small number of production. A lot of people are kicking the tires, especially because of the VMware thing announcement doing that. We are absolutely working with some customers, and it's definitely in our roadmap. You should see it literally in
Yeah, it's interesting to explore, as I know it's one of those things that it's, and again, I don't want to talk about the ex-girlfriend that is living with somebody else at the neighbor's house there. We've got Dell in the room. I want to be respectful that I know it's tough to talk about that as a customer. When I look at, price, pressure, those things start to look attractive. And the first challenge is always, how do I get my workloads there, and how do I protect them once they're there? And I feel like OpenStack's missing that in the biggest way. And I see that your application awareness is absolutely would be amazing to see in that ecosystem.
Look, if I can add just the Dell perspective, VMware is still and probably will be for some time the dominant virtualization hypervisor provider.
Absolutely, yeah.
But having said that, with the announcements that came out, with the way that the Broadcom acquisition went, there's no discussion that we talk to anyone, don't care large or small, where the conversation around alternative hypervisors doesn't come up. And even if they're not moving today, and even if they're not moving next year, because it can take time, every one of them is looking at the contracts that they have and the either 1 year or 3 year licensing agreements that they have, is thinking about, do I have a dual vendor strategy? Do I have ability to actually move if I have to? And so the conversation is really, I can't engage with someone who's not going to provide me alternatives. And so I think HYCU providing all of the alternatives is great because it takes away all that objection. Basically, where do you want to go to? You have options.
Yeah.
So from our perspective, it's really important that we have that kind of coverage.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, and I know it's a tough question to have to ask, you know,
sure.
So thank you.
So a question on the conversion.
Yep.
Are you doing a pre-conversion and then using the APIs to ingest it into the cloud, or are you using the cloud's vendor-specific API conversion
It's
tool?
the latter. It's the cloud vendor-specific APIs to basically make sure that we have the ability to not just move the VMs to the cloud, but also make those VMs bootable. So we have to make use of the appropriate cloud vendors' APIs for us to convert that VM from point A to point B.
Now, a follow-up to that would be, have they gotten better over time? Because I remember like AWS as an example would be kind of at will and not necessarily a high priority inside of AWS's environments.
True.
So is that still the case? Have you been working with the hyperscalers to kind of get them to boost something for that particular ingestion process?
What you bring up is an excellent point, because we try to use the native cloud vendors' APIs as much as possible. But to your point, they don't always support the latest drivers because they come up with new new CPUs and so on. So there are things there. We have to inject additional drivers. So one of the things our team does is tries to use the native as much as possible if it's supported. If it's not supported, we do actually inject the right set of drivers and do the conversion. So that is something our team has actually had to handle all the different varieties. Okay, absolutely, we have done that.
But and one thing I'll say, often we would say this in the offline after to say thank you, but I really appreciate that it wasn't now with 100% more AI, now ransomware as a service. What you've really shown, I like that it's just fundamentals plus fundamentals that literally are 1 + 1 = 3 because you augment each other's capabilities. And I know within HYCU, especially like the application level discovery and intelligence is unmatched, to what I've seen. So what do you see as the next thing inside HYCU? Like what other workloads are you looking to stretch into?
So that's a great question. It's probably, okay, so that's a great question. One of the things which we will actually have the next session, which is one of the things we're going to talk about is around AI. Somebody said AI, but it's not about the AI from the context of saying, how do we add AI, which there are a lot of areas which we do. This is around customers, as Simon mentioned earlier, some of the things that customers have tons of data everybody is working on an AI project, right? They said 80% of the businesses are supposed to come out with an AI solution before the end of the year. And that being the case, how do you keep that data safe for customers? I think you heard also from David earlier. So that's the next topic, and we will definitely cover a lot more about there.
So just to do a quick refresh on the demo, we kind of got lost there. The migration job, as you can see, was successful enough. This is the job log, and I was trying to locate the VM, and it's right here. Sorry, bad eyes. So this is the HYCU VM -002 that we just migrated live, and the VM is basically up and running as we speak. So that is the true power of our solution, the ability to basically move from one platform to another platform by literally streamlining all of those hundreds of tasks with no issues, and showcasing this in live demo in itself speaks volumes. So that is the true power of HYCU and DDB put together.